Right, good evening again, and thank you very much for coming tonight. As you know, we are going to be talking about circular economy and how we can reduce waste. We got a fantastic panel here tonight with us. I'm just going to do a quick introduction and just leave the floor to them since their talks are much more interesting than mine anyway. So first of all, we got Hani Hatami. She's the Sustainability Ambassador for Human Scale. Good evening. We got Anthony Gray, the product specialist for ANN Future Workplaces. Eilish Walker, she's associate at Heritage Alliance, so you know the practice better than me since she's one of the local heroes. And then last but not least, Colette Burns, architectural project leader at the Technological University in Dublin. The format tonight, each speaker is going to have a presentation, about 10 minutes, and then we'll leave space for questions afterwards. So if you want to take notes, well, as soon as every speaker's finished, we can ask them questions. So without wasting any more time, Hani, please.
Should I stand up or? Yes, I think it might be a better option if I stand here. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thanks for making it here tonight. The weather is absolutely atrocious. I was flying from London this morning. It took me 3.5 hours to be here. Ended up in Shannon, but finally made my way to Dublin, so I'm very glad to be here. Over the next 10 minutes, I'm going to give you a short presentation on human scale story and our net positive approach. So when it comes to sustainability, everybody wants to be sustainable and do the right thing. But as soon as companies realize it's going to cost them time and money, they promise to be less bad, which is not a bad place to be, but that's not where we want to end up. Everybody's very happy to talk about what they've done in the past, but no intention of actually talking about the future. At Human Scale, we are focusing on being net positive, which means being responsible for our footprints and taking 100% accountability for the impact that we have on the planet. Now, our manufacturing company, there's 3 standing issues that manufacturing companies are contributing to it. First is the issue of global warming. So we contribute 40% to the issue, which out of that 40%, half belongs to embodied carbon. Basically, every single thing that gets into the building. The other issue is the issue of material transparency. We feel like there is not enough clarification or guidance for designers, specifiers, and buyers in terms of knowing what products and chemicals or materials have been used in the products that you've seen around today. So we don't feel like anybody has any idea or any reference point that they can go to. And the last issue is the problem of ocean plastic. Thanks to the likes of BBC Blue Planet and David Attenborough, we're aware of this existing issue. Collectively, we throw away about 8 million tons of plastic in the ocean. And I'm sure, as you've all heard, by 2050, we're going to have more plastic in the ocean than fish. So these are the 3 issues that manufacturers, companies, doesn't matter about the background, we all contributing to it. As Human Scale, we've been starting our journey since 2016. We've been asking ourselves, what if we can be different? What if we can actually clean more water, use less energy, reduce and take away all the chemicals of concern that everybody uses in their products? And what if we can actually have a positive impact in the communities? So this is a brief chart about our how we operate as a company. So in 2016, the high bar for sustainability was net zero, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with the term. Being net zero is sitting at the zero line. You're not having any negative impact and negative impact on the environment, nothing positive. You're sitting right at the middle line. And we thought, this is great. This is where we want to be. But we thought, what about other people that are not doing anything? And how can we be different? So we decided to focus on 6 categories, as you can see on below, in terms of products, operation, and company. So it was healthy materials, waste, climate, water, CSR, and wildlife preservations. And we started doing that for some time, improving little bits as we went along, but we had no idea if we were on the right path or we were following the right framework. I don't know if you guys have heard about International Living Future Institute. They're an American-based sustainability standard, and they've got some very good, rigorous sustainability certifications. What's so different about their certification to what's already out currently at the moment is you need to prove that you have a positive impact as you manufacture products right now. So you need to be transparent in terms of what you use in your materials, in terms of energy, water, carbon. And we aligned ourselves with International Living Future Institute, which I'm going to talk about them a bit later on. So these were the areas we started focusing on since 2016. Now, the main topic that's very, very important, and it fits in really well with our next presenter's presentation, it's the topic of material transparency. Now, there is a big issue in terms of being transparent. Most manufacturing companies, they don't want you to know what's in their product because in most cases they've used cheap, toxic materials. And if you go and approach any manufacturing company, for example, if you come to me and say, hey, human scale, what's in that chair? You usually get three answers. A, you're not a toxicologist, you don't understand what's, if we give you a list, you won't have any idea of what's good and what's not good. B, you need to respect the privacy of our suppliers. Basically, it's like you go into Waitrose or Tesco or anywhere else, picking a yogurt, and there's no information in the back of the yogurt to tell you what's in that product. That's exactly the same thing. And the other answer could be something down the line of, oh, it's going to take a lot of time. We won't be able to tell you what's been used in the product. So if you think about it, they expect you to pay for a product that you have no idea what's in that product. Now, there's something called a declare label, which is a third-party audited nutritional label for products. Now, if you go on Living Future Institute website and click on Program and Declare basically gives you a set of three very good information. A, where the product was made, so you have a great understanding of where the product is coming from. B, where does it end up at the end of its life cycle? It's great to say a product is recyclable, it's 90%, 20%. What does it actually mean? How much of it is it recyclable? And the best part of it is the ingredient section. So in order to obtain this certification, you need to be 100% transparent, not 99%, not 80%. Whatever's been used in any product that has the certification needs to be written down there. So as long as nothing has been highlighted in red or amber, it's safe to say your product that you specify you're buying is red list chemical free. And this certification contributes to LEED and BREEAM, if this is something that you guys want to get for the project that you're working on. And like I said, the best thing about this is not something that human scale's done. This is not something that we have assessed. This is not something about we published and said, well done to us, we've done a great job. It's actually third-party audited, and it's accessible for a lot of companies. And this is a brief chart just to show that how, since 2016, we've been driving the industry, pushing the industry by our Declare and HPDs, which is Health Product Declaration Forms, which is another format of disclosing chemicals and everything that's been used in the product. And it's really great to see that how by 2020, the industry is finally catching up. And considering we only form 4% of this big industry and market, it's really good to see that everybody's changing the way they operate in. Now, I briefly want to go through this slide with you guys. So if you're a designer, specifier, or in a position to pick your product, please be aware of this 5 chemicals. These are chemicals of concern that are heavily being used in our industry. It's very cheap, it's very accessible. First one's Chrome 6. We usually find them in the base of chairs. We don't use Chrome 6, we use polished aluminum. Or Chrome 3, which is something that doesn't have any negative impact on a day-to-day user. And I don't remember if any of you remember a film called Erin Brockovich with Julia Roberts. I'm glad, there's a few nods. Sometimes when I present, they're like, no. I'm like, Jesus Christ, I'm getting old. But that was a perfect example that how when a pollutant or chemical of concern gets into an environment, how it's affecting the day-to-day user. Next one's PVC or plastic. Some companies got their own vinyl range. It's very cheap, it's very durable, but it affects us in 3 stages. A, they use a mercury when they make the product to get that plasticky effect. B, if you use a product that's got a heavy content of PVC in it, the product off-gases. So if you buy something that's wrapped up in plastic, when you open it, it smells plasticky. I used to love the smell of things that Mom used to buy when I was a kid. I was like, oh, it smells new. I found out a few years ago that's PVC off-gassing, which is very dangerous. And if you want to get rid of it, you have to burn it because there's no other way. You can't recycle PVC. certain types of it. And it releases a lot of toxics in the air, and it's linked to a lot of lung cancers for people that are actually exposed to the PVC on a day-to-day basis. Next one is formaldehyde. You essentially will find it in most top tables. Most companies have a non-formaldehyde version of their top tables, but they don't advertise it as a standard range. Because if they do, they have to admit they're using formaldehyde in a standard range that's been, probably is cheaper than non-formaldehyde range. The other one's PFAs or PFCs. So essentially, every single piece of fabric in our industry has got a coating of stain-resistant coating. Now, it's proven there's a chemical of concern in this coating, and the reason they use it is just to make sure that if you spill something on your chair, on your sofa, on your cushion, it's very easy to clean. Now, somebody asked a question and said, well, if it's proven that's got a chemical of concern on top of this fabric, how long does it last? Is it like 5 years, 10 years? And they started doing a double rub test to see how long this coating would last. And it only lasts for 6 months. And if you think about it, like, what does it go after that 6 months? It gets this chemical of concern. I think it's called C3 or C6. It gets into our clothes. We take it home. We bring this chemical of concern into our own environments. We wash it. We're releasing these toxins in the water stream. So I'm not standing here telling you that we have the answer. We don't. I just want you to be aware of these chemicals that's already out there in the environment. And the problem with these, they're not bioaccumulative, which means they are bioaccumulative, which means once they go into our bodies are not designed to digest them. That's why a lot of late allergic reaction and illnesses are linked over the past 20 years, are linked to being overexposed to chemicals of concerns, to like things that are wrapped up in plastic and other stuff. And the last one is flame retardant. Funny enough, we had a conversation earlier on. A lot of requirements has changed since then. So you don't necessarily need to have a coating of flame retardant on the fabric. You can choose better fabric options that doesn't have that coating. But a lot of companies, especially retail industries, still asking for that flame retardant coating. So if you, I'm more than happy to share this presentation with you guys. If you want that slide, please take a picture. Just be aware, ask the questions from manufacturers. Because if you don't ask the question, there's no incentive for anyone to change the way they operate or even use chemicals in their products. I know there's a really big concern about sustainability, circularity. I work mostly with designers, and there's a big focus on retake, reuse, and repurpose. It's great to think about those stuff. It's great, but when we're designing products, we need to have sustainability in mind from inception stages. It's great to say a chair, it is recyclable, they can take it back, they can recycle it, but if that chair's got 300 parts, or 350 parts, and it's got so many adjustments, or not just a chair, any product, that's been loaded with knobs, adjustments, and levers, that product will never get recycled. Or if it got chemicals of concern, it will never be in the position to get recycled. So maybe design product at human scale, we think about the end of its life cycle, 15 years down the line. So when we design things, we try to design things that doesn't have all the unnecessary adjustments. All of our task chairs are modular based, which means you can take them out, replace them, and reuse them. So this is good to have in mind if you're from a design stage, if you're in a position that you're designing products, to think about your last stop right at the beginning. Now, I've been telling you about we are net positive, we're different, we want to have positive impact on the planet. What does it actually mean to us? So we've installed rainwater capture system on top of our facilities. So 100% of water required for our manufacturing facilities is captured from rain. In big productions like Piscataway, if we have to use water, we only use 7 gallons, which equates to 3 minutes of having a shower. Now, I know my showers are a bit longer than that, but that's something that we've done. And next one is solar panel system. So we've installed it on top of our main facilities. So 85% of electricity required is generated by solar panels. And that's an old figure, but at the moment we have diverted waste from landfills by 94%. And we're aiming to obtain a certification called True Zero Waste, which means all of our production facilities, there will be no waste coming out of it. We'll recycle and reuse them within our facilities. And let's move on to the topic of ocean plastic that I mentioned earlier on. Now, the problem with ocean plastic, 20% belongs to discarded fishing nets. And these fishing nets, they're used mostly nylons because they're very durable in it. It doesn't get recycled. So what happens is, like, fishermen go and fish, They don't want their fishing nets to just throw them back in the ocean. 3% sits on top, 97% goes to the bottom. And it's a cycle, a vicious cycle that comes up, they catch the fish, and it goes down, and that's called ghost fishing, which is really affecting the ecosystem. So we've been aware of this problem since 2016-17, and we've been working with a company called, it was like three guys called, from different backgrounds. They formed a company called Barrio, which means wave in Chilean. So what they love to surf. And then what they did was like they were collecting, working with the local fishermen, encouraged them to bring back the fishing nets. They turned them into little pellets, and they were using them to make sunglasses and skateboards. And they were doing it for some times. We were introduced to them by International Living Future Institute, and we thought, that's a great idea, we can use that. So what we've done since 2016 is at the moment, we're working with the fishermen down south of Latin America, because the facilities are there. We get them to come and drop their discarded fishing nets, drop them at one side to our production facilities. We collect them, we clean them, we shred them, and we use them, these pellets, in the back of our chairs. So there are two chairs that we have, a Smart Chair and Liberty Chair, Smart Ocean Chair and Liberty Chair, and every chair has got 2 pounds of discarded fishing net in the frame of the chair, which is, I think, is a great idea, and you get a bit of dolphin at the back end of it. So I think it's a really great story to tell your staff, like the chairs, like it's just a very small step dealing with a bigger problem. And we'll be going to Orgotech Germany next week, and we are launching a brand new chair called Path Chair. And that Path chair is it's taken us 5 years to bring this chair back into the industry. And what's so great about this is it's got 10 pounds of discarded fishing nets and PET bottles in it. So please feel free to come and give a test. Come and try this. I can talk to you about this a bit later on. And since the beginning of this year, we're very happy to say all of our products are net positive, which means they are climate, energy, and water positive. So every time you buy and specify these products, we can tell you how much climate's been saved, or how much energy has been saved, or how much water's been saved. And my last slide is, I'd like to finish this presentation by 2 things. A, remember the page with all the chemicals of concern. It's very important that you guys ask the question, because if you don't ask the question, people won't change the way they manufacture products, and there's no incentive for people to actually change the way they manufacture and operate. And just be a bit brutal. Next time somebody says, oh, I don't know what's in that product, you don't need to know. Just say, I'm not going to buy your product. I'm not going to specify it, because it's something that you should really care about the future for ourselves. And if we're going to be surrounded by products that's in a space that we constantly breathing them, you really want to be making better purchasing and specifying decisions. Thank you very much, guys.
Hi guys, how you doing? I'm Anthony for people that just joined. I'm from Future Workplaces, and we love to talk about sustainability. That is something that we do, something we love doing, but we also happen to manufacture furniture. And one of the companies I want to talk about today is Plank, and want to highlight textile waste, or what we call a recovered resource, and how these recovered resources like textile waste, like the fishing nets, how plastic waste can actually be reused and repurposed into new products. So I want to talk about why we do what we do. And in the UK and Ireland, we produce a roughly 560,000 tons of textile waste, or recovered resources. Of that, 110,000 tons is produced here in Ireland. Only 46,000 tons is ever recycled, ever reused. Is ever discarded as a household waste. However, on average, 4.1 kilos of that textile waste that each person produces, only 0.5 is ever recycled, and 0.9 is incinerated. And the rest of it, 2.7, ends up in landfill every single year. One thing that people don't actually realize is the textile industry actually produces 10% of greenhouse emissions. That's in manufacturing, that's their textile waste, that's right across the board. So what does 4,500 tons of textile waste look like every single year? It's 16 Arctic lorries. Now that's big Arctic lorries, big trailers. Textile waste produces 10% of greenhouse emissions. That's more than aviation and shipping combined. So when you actually think about the numbers, that's massive. At COP26, there was huge highlights in talking about air travel and air pollution, and I 100% agree with that and how it impacts. But no one really talks about the textile waste emissions that are actually produced every single year by the fashion industry, by the upholstery industry, and how other companies aren't really tackling these problems and aren't talking about these problems a lot more. So at Planck, we wanted to take a different approach, look at things a lot differently. How can we produce a material or a product or this reclaimed resource, as we call it, into something new that can be used every single day in our furniture, in our kitchen cabinets, right throughout the furniture industry, but also in other industries. And we've had conversations, large conversations with the motor industry about how we can use reclaimed resource into the dashboards of their vehicles, into suitcases, and how we can cross-collaborate ideas and concepts. We don't have to be solid in the way that we talk and the way that we behave. So, after a while, after lots of research, we understood that there was a number of different processes that are already in place. People collecting textile waste, people talking about waste, and the way that people actually behave waste. I don't know if you've ever looked at an old mattress and opened it up and you got this, like a carded felt, or acoustics or housing insulation, or even the old blankets that you see on the removals. I'm sure a lot of you that in the furniture industry would have come across the felt blankets. This has been around for absolute years. So we decided to have a look at that, how we can understand that and work with social enterprises. And we came up with a process that was completely unique, just by thinking outside the box, thinking a bit differently, and how we can actually take this material and bind it with a biodegradable binder that's made out of potato and cornstarch, press it under heat. And we, trials and tribulations, and we've been around for 7 years, and 2 years of that was purely inception, playing around, messing around with these different types of materials. Obviously, we don't advocate people throwing away their jeans, so don't give me any old clothes by the end of this. We only advocate jeans or clothes that can't be reused or repurposed. So we always encourage to donate clothes, to give clothes to other people that are going to relive, reused. So we went about talking about with other companies, under industries, about the issues and trials and tribulations that they faced, about how they collected their waste and how we can work with them. So with companies like Tommy Hilfiger and H&M, and we had this conversation a little bit earlier on, about these companies now are coming out with these new initiatives of circular economy. And we focus very heavily on circular economy. Instead of talking about sustainability, let's think about responsibility. Let's think about how we see our waste and how we see our products. So instead of discarding clothes or discarding furniture, let's see how we can repurpose it and re-educate as well. So working with these companies, we decided to collect a lot of their waste, shred, spin, create sheets or press into new furniture. And this is a closed loop system. So we don't just create a linear model and go, here's a chair made out of like waste. We can actually close the loop on that completely by saying, like you described earlier, let's think about the end at the beginning. Let's design out waste at the beginning so that everything that we produce can be dismantled, reconstructed, refigured, and put back into the economy. And that's something that is very important, because the longer that a material or product is in the economy, the more sustainable it becomes. So that's why companies like Eames and Vitra, inherently, they become sustainable because some of their products have been around since the 50s, and you can still buy them today. And that's absolutely brilliant because, again, their products aren't ended up in landfill. They're not being wasted, they're not being discarded. They're being repurposed, and people can see the value in that. So if we think about how we design things at the beginning, they can continue and continue. So the materials that we originally looked at were things that are in abundance. Jeans, we all have a pair of jeans. Believe it or not, these are my pair of jeans that I've kindly donated for this event. But denim. So again, instead of hiding this material, we've created a feature that tells the story. So whenever you sit on it, whenever you look at it, you can kind of get that story and understand its true origins, where it all came from. With the army clothes. So in conjunction with the armed forces, also the police forces, as well as social enterprises, we set up a collaboration, a stream where we actually worked with them to help collect their waste and process their waste. So our green is made out of the army clothes. With coffee bags, and if you know that coffee bags, when you get your green coffee, that bag isn't recyclable due to food standard hygienes. So that's discarded. Or if you go to a really hipster coffee shop, you see it used as a chair or a pillow or something like that. We've actually worked with very large organizations and taken away their coffee bags and actually producing it into a new material. With cabin crew, we work very closely with KLM. Now, this actually demonstrates that working with an organization and understanding their problems and how they can become circular. We produced the sharp blue. I don't know if you've flown with KLM. They've got very bright blue uniforms. With white denim, that was cyclical. So if we've been doing it for a while, and we've actually noticed that during the winter, a lot of the light clothes get discarded. During the summer, a lot of dark clothes get discarded. So we can understand and see them patterns within the fashion industry. Business suits, that for us was a really exciting project. Working very closely with the company, with ABN AMRO, we understand what their problems were, and we presented to their leadership team to introduce clothing bins and said to them, wouldn't it be cool if your employees can get involved? From a design element, that's great because you have a sense of ownership within the space. People can be there and go, well, I contribute to this. I help to the space and have a sense of ownership. They loved it so much that we put clothing bins in all of their offices right throughout the Netherlands. We collected a lot of their textile waste, and we actually made a lot of their furniture for their space, made out of their own business suits. We then went back and we surveyed their employees because we were quite interested to see how the whole project went on a whole. We actually noticed that 95% of them took up more sustainable practices at home and championed new initiatives within their own organization. So inherently, by designing a space where you think about a material and how people interact with that space, you can actually have a longer lasting impact on the way people can behave within the space, as well as at home. And something quite simple, like a chair that hasn't changed for thousands of years, you sit on it, it's got a minimum of 3 legs, it works. But as soon as you change the material, it gets people thinking about how they use the space. So with our first design product, this took 12 pairs of jeans, which is 5.9 kilos of textile waste, completely circular. Only 3 materials. Oak, steel for the screws, and our material. We could dismantle it, shred it back down, and remake a new one over and over again, obviously provided the timber is not too badly damaged. 9.6 pairs of jeans go into making that. And as a startup and as a real entrepreneurial company, molds are very expensive. I'm sure there's lots of manufacturers here that look at manufacturing and presses and molds that are very expensive. Our mold costs us around about £40,000 to produce this mold. And what we decided to do is use the same mold for our Ubu chair as we did for our stool. Because we're able to recycle our material, we decided to cut down the back to create the stool and then put the material back into the process to create the chairs. So again, closing our own loops behind us, ensuring that we're not leaving a trail or a problem behind us. The Ubu chair is produced out of 7.2 pairs of jeans and 3.5 kilos of textile waste, or recovered resource. We're trying to coin the phrase. The Rebel collection, again, 7.5 pairs of jeans, 3.8 kilos of textile waste. We produce this out of steel, 70% recycled steel, and we're able to recycle this and reuse this. We always highlight jeans because everyone has a pair of jeans, so it's easy for them to understand. When you kind of see that many jeans, then you can kind of understand how much waste there is. In terms of sustainability, obviously we were talking very earlier on about credentials and LEED, BREEAM, SCAR. I don't know where do we end with the amount of credentials there are. One thing that we do believe in circularity. So we've actually produced our own sustainable credentials by actually showing the residual value of our materials, of our products, to demonstrate the circularity of them. And that's it. Very nice and simple and succinct. Thank you.
you. Sure, I've got to hold this. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming, and thank you to the organisers for inviting me to this event tonight. So just to give you a brief summary of who I am, I'm an architect, associate architect at Energy Lines, who are based in Dublin. We're, I think, probably the largest architectural practice in Ireland at the moment, with over 300 staff. And I've been working there for 7 years. We also have a Cork office as well, so we've 2 offices. I was asked to share a recently completed fit-out project with you guys tonight. So the project I'm going to share is the Central Bank of Ireland's new premises at, in the Dublin Docklands region. So myself and Colette actually worked together previously on the first Central Bank of Ireland building, which is the gold building you might recognise on the quays just down from the convention centre. That was completed in 2017. Sorry. Oh God, where am I going? So then in 2019, the Central Bank of Ireland approached Energy Lines to discuss their newly purchased premises at Dublin Landings 4 and 5, which is the 2 buildings highlighted there in red, which sits directly behind the gold building, their original North Wall Quay premises. And what they wanted to do was to consolidate all of their city centre operations into one efficient integrated campus in the Docklands region. So they sold up Spencer, well, they're in the process of selling up Spencer Dock and their Dame Street premises and moving to this location. So Ballymore, who developed this whole area with Walls Construction, stayed on to complete the fit out for the bank with us as the lead design on the project. And the project consisted of, well, firstly amalgamating those 2 buildings into one building for the bank, and the other aspect was to create a 30-metre long link bridge connecting the new buildings to the old one. So that's the completed bridge there. And both the fit out and the bridge were completed at the end of July of this year, so just 2 months ago. And this is just an organisational diagram to show you what's involved in the fit-out project. So there's 2 levels of office floor plan that were fully fit out. There's 3 tenant levels at the top. The level in the middle, shown in yellow, is what I'm going to focus on today, which is their new collaboration hub for hybrid working, I suppose. There's a restaurant, a full commercial kitchen, and their administrative sanctions procedure facility in the red at basement 1. There's 2 reception spaces, a whole meeting suite at ground floor, and then the basement is all your welfare, car park, and all of that sort of thing. We have achieved so far the client's goals in terms of sustainability targets. So we have achieved a LEED Platinum rating. We've achieved a BER A2, a LEED Platinum accreditation, a BER A2 rating, and we're in the process of submitting our BREEAM submission, so we're on target to achieve BREEAM Outstanding, which is the highest rating. I'm going to focus on these topics in terms of the fit-out design, and I should say, we're by no means experts in circularity, but inherently, if the design is considered and it's well executed, there's circular aspects to every design. So the first point, which I think is important to make, because I think it happens in a lot of fit-out projects where you have the base build contract with the shell and core team that build the structure and the facade, and the fit-out team come in after when that contract is finished, and you take over from that point. And what often happens is the purchaser or the tenant that comes in immediately strips out the finishes that went into that base build project. So what we did was we were aware and recognized the changes the bank wanted to make early. So we came in during the middle of the construction of the shell and omitted from that contract the elements which we knew we were going to have to strip out later to save the on-material wastage and costs of doing that work at that time. So the left image is showing you what it would have looked like, which is in another building adjacent. And the right is what we inherited, which is just the structural shell. We saw an opportunity, seeing as these were becoming two buildings, to transform it from just an empty light well into an active, dynamic space for the bank, which they could use as to circulate across, and to we've filled it with nice breakout spaces and collab spaces, so they could, benefit from the natural light above. The next thing that I think is important is timeless design. So timeless, sorry, hold on, I'll just find where I am. Yeah, so for me, timeless architecture is represented through functionality, simplicity, good quality materials, and a low maintenance design. It's design where the details are well considered and there's a sensibility to the design. Designing for longevity and durability rather than fashions or trends. So this is a knowledge or an understanding that we applied to the design of this fit-out project. So the base palette is very neutral. We tried to use timber finishes wherever we could, bringing in organic elements, because I suppose timber, it always gives you a sense of a clean, calm, comfortable aesthetic. And then we built up that layer with bringing in a color palette on top in the furniture and the joinery and the paint colors. So items maybe that had a shorter life expectancy and that could be swapped in and out or changed between the spaces. The Central Bank of Ireland have a large collection of Paul Henry paintings which they have on display, so we drew on the colour palette from those paintings as inspiration for the colours that we brought into all the furniture in the building. So you can see the layering of those colours on top of our neutral base palette. The restaurant is located at a subterranean level at basement 1, so it has no connection with the outside environment, and it's relying on daylight from above. So we very intentionally increased the intensity of the colours in this space. I suppose biophilia is a big talking point with clients at the moment, and they're aware of the benefits of that has on occupants' well-being and comfort. And so we were, as you can see, we brought in a lot of planted elements, a calm kind of green backdrop to the space to help the occupants feel that connection to the environment. This is our typical office layout. And the strategy was to keep all the support spaces centered in the middle to free up the office floor, and all of those meeting pods that are around in between the office space, they're all demountable, and so they can be taken down and relocated to allow teams and to expand or contract over time and to shuffle their furniture around. So that's the office floor with the demountable screens. All of the larger meeting rooms feature folding walls, and a lot of consideration went into the furniture, the weight of it, making sure that it's light enough that it can be stacked, pulled in and out of rooms as needed, or reconfiguring the space, flip-top tables, casters on tables and chairs wherever we felt it was appropriate, and to give them that kind of flexibility with their meeting rooms. So COVID hit our project just as we were getting into things on site. Maybe, I think it was our first site meeting on site was the week that it was all kicked off and we were in our first lockdown. So we actually didn't have a single site meeting on site for the entire project. So we did everything remote, which was kind of mad. So yeah, my 1-bedroom apartment at the time was just wall-to-wall finishes and samples, and we couldn't even get to the kitchen space, but that's how we worked. But it for the bank, it meant reconsidering the way they worked. And after a lot of research with them and design options, we redesigned one of the office floors into this level 2 collaboration hub is what we're calling it now, where you can see we have no traditional workspace. Instead, we have a range of spaces from very small rooms to larger engagement staff spaces like this. I think the Lintex movable writing boards feature here, and there's folding walls, and this is a discussion space. So again, it's the furniture which is kind of making the space rather than this one was obviously a fixed joinery, so it was a large debate space. But yeah, we had a range of spaces from these large kind of discussion and debate spaces to small informal booth seats and spaces where you could have a one-on-one chat. So in that way, the design was very flexible and giving them a huge range of spaces to find a place that worked for the individual and the way that they want to work. We also, instead of creating lots of enclosed meeting rooms, we started looking at other ways, more flexible, adaptable ways to create spaces within a larger space. So we had acoustic curtains dividing spaces, these space door divider screens that had integrated AVs and writing boards and seats in them. We used slatted timber walls, we used planters, we had high back booth seats that had AV in them, and they just love these spaces now, and they're kind of already fighting over these spaces. You can see on a lot of these, even the little booths, they've put names like a meeting room name on them because they're booking out the seats basically because it's so popular. So it's funny to see how they've changed as an organization and adapted to this way of working, and they've realized the possibilities they have in having a more flexible office layout. So ways that we considered modularity and disassembly, one of the challenges we had was that when we got to the point where we were redesigning this floor, all the M&E services had already gone in for a workstation setup, a typical office layout. So we had to work with what had been installed. And we used this flexible track lighting system, which is fantastic, from XAL. And it allowed us to set up a grid that could be changed later even when the bank needs to change those spaces, and all of the lights are magnetic, so you can swap out the light types and the locations of the lights. So it looks great too, so it's great to have something that works, is flexible and looks nice. All of our timber panels to the walls are all your standard sheet sizes, so they weren't bespoke sizes, and they're all on clip-on system, not bonded to the wall, so they can be easily taken down and reused somewhere else. And then my last point is on product specification. And I suppose I want to just touch on the growing responsibility that us as designers have, and the sphere of influence maybe we don't realize we have. And I think I've come to the realization that as an architect, you could probably do more damage in one day sitting down writing a specification than someone could do recycling in a year. And so we have to get a grip on our specifications and really get into the detail of the products that we're putting into our specifications. So how we're doing that as a practice is we're focusing on two main things. at the moment. So we're doing in-house whole life carbon assessments and getting to grips with the one-click tool. And to do that, I suppose we need the EPDs from suppliers. So that's massive for us and how we're learning the impact that carbon is having on our buildings, and how then to design it out at an early stage, as you say, is key. So we're trying to bring this in at early design stage. And even from the assessments we have done, we've already been able to identify, I suppose, the worst offenders in terms of products or materials. And to name a couple, there's raised access floors, which are an exponential carbon number in our fit-outs. So we're already looking at second-hand raised access floors and where we can source them, or low-carbon raised access floors. And another one is partition systems. So plasterboard in partition systems or ceilings. So we're already now moving towards trying to convince clients to go with the open ceiling or semi-open flexible kind of ceilings, as opposed to plasterboard throughout, which is a major impact on your carbon footprint. And the other thing we're looking into, and we're doing a lot of research on, is material passports, which I think ties into what the speakers were talking about. Now, we're obviously, it's a huge world that we're only scraping the surface at the moment, but we are trying to find how it can work for us in our BIM modeling, and how we can integrate material identity and create databases that we can use and integrate with how we work as designers. So that's the two kind of things that we're focusing on, I suppose, for the immediate future as architects in our practice. Okay, thank you.
Hi, good evening. I'm the last speaker here. My name is Colette Burns. I worked previously with Ailish and Energy Alliance Architects, but just before COVID, I moved to the Technological University Dublin, so that was kind of a strange transition. And the project I'm going to talk to you about is one of the projects which is on our campus, our Grange Gorman campus. This is an aerial shot. I'm not sure how many people are familiar with the campus. It's not that far, actually, from here in North Dublin. It's a 74-hectare site, and it used to be, well, still remains surrounded by a very large wall. It was a healthcare facility for the HSE here in the city, and that wall existed for about 200 years. You're going to get a bit of a history lesson here. It existed for about 200 years, and I think a lot of people, even who lived in Dublin, didn't even realise the scale of the site that existed there. So, as I say, that's the overview. In 2010, slowly you're getting, you can see the red line at the top there. That's the size of the site. And I think you can just about make out Stoneybatter, Smithfield. I did actually put in Smock Alley, where you are, just there between the two lights. So that's where it is in relation to the city, and that's where it is in relation to where we are now. There is a full SDZ, which is a strategic development zone. I shan't be giving you a talk on strategic development zones, but essentially it means that the city has mandated this site for development, and it fast tracks through a planning system. There was a master plan done, and the master plan was published in 2010, and it has a whole series of structuring principles in terms of how the entire 74-hectare site, acre site is to be developed. The size of the buildings, the height of the buildings, the edges of the buildings, but it also mandates green fingers, which are those north-south routes, which go from the city centre to the south up to the north, as well as east-west connections. So instead of the site being a hidden area in the city with literally a big stone wall around it, the idea is to reintegrate it back into the city centre itself. That's some of the blocks. So the ongoing development, they started work on the site in 2014, essentially reimagining and reusing the darker structures, which are the historic structures. In the centre there's a series of little cluster. It's actually called our cluster site, and they're part of the historic structures which remain. There's 11 historic structures which remain, including part of the wall. The one that I'm going to talk today about is the one in red there, which is called the Lower House. There's also a series of new developments which have recently been opened on the site, again opened during COVID, and that was the central quad, which is 36,000 square metres of development, and then the east quad, which is another 16,000. So there are huge developments which are happening in the area. There's also massive development of the public realm, biodiversity, which everybody is very interested in terms of leaving spaces. There's huge green areas for playing fields, but also for wilding, as well as a lot of surface treatments. So that's the lower house. That's what it looks like now. And this is, again, part of the history lesson. That was the original plan, and it's done by an architect called Francis Johnson. He was, in his day, which would be the 19th century, a well-known architect. He designed the GPO, which I'm sure people do know here. He was also partially responsible for Nelson's Column, which we all know is no longer with us, as well as this house, this building here, which was actually the hospital. So it was 3-storey structure and then a quad structure. That's what it looked like in the 1950s. Again, that's the site. You can see the lower house, which is there, the long linear building on the bottom. That's what it looked like in the whole site looked like in the 1950s. And then there was a demolition spree, and this is what it looked like in 2018. So essentially, those sorts of buildings in Dublin generally, and in this site in particular, they weren't respected or protected. And then a lot of societies began to become very interested in these buildings. Again, it was reimagining and reuse before anyone thought of reimagining and reuse. So the structure there was left essentially as a ruin, and that's what we inherited from the HSE building. We propped it up to make sure it didn't collapse because it was a protected structure. And then we started to think about what could it actually be used for. So this was prior to my time. But then they decided that the nature of the building and the nature of the requirements on the site was actually for a student centre. So the series of spaces, they're long linear spaces, as you could see in the original plan. And they're actually quite flexible as a requirement because essentially they're long, they're linear, they're square, they can do a whole load of different things. This is some of the activities that happened. There's a whole organisation called Grange Gorman Histories, which is worth looking into if you have an interest in history, of the activities that happened, because the Grange Gorman site would have been known for mental health and a lot of very negative connotations with that, rightly so, but it was actually, to be fair, it wasn't all bad. They also had theatrical performances, they had sports teams, they had a whole series of other things. So part of that, remembering the life that did exist there, is something that we also wanted to embed so that the history of the projects didn't just get eliminated. Ailish was talking about the colour palettes and the Paul Henry inspirations. In actual fact, this was a shot that was taken from one of the stair cores, and we saw the palimpsest actually of paint colours which have been painted over the years, because the original building is 19th century, and then so for 200 years there was paint layers and paint layers and paint layers, lead paint, I hasten to add, used on this, so it had to be very carefully dismantled. But the architects took some inspiration from the colour palette there and reused that colour palette when they were choosing some of the finishes in the new building. And this is the brief. So essentially we have the only structure which was left was the linear building, and then they extended the 2 sections to the north where the original other wings of the quad building would be. And as I say, it was to be a student centre, but other uses got hijacked onto it. As we discovered, we actually didn't have enough space in other buildings. So there was a music pavilion on one side, and that's 3-storey, 18 rooms. There is a dining space, because there's never enough dining areas on any campus. There's also sports studios, 2 of the linear spaces where they were cleared out and became sports studios. And then there's also just common rooms, just common areas for the students to be in. And the colours that you're seeing there are a version, actually, of the colours that we ended up on site. So it was a huge undertaking, obviously, because essentially it was a ruin. It had 4 walls, roughly, and a little bit of a roof, no floors, bits of staircase. Any of the windows, there's 4 surviving windows, and the other, I think, 242 windows had to be remade. So it was a massive undertaking, again, during COVID, which just adds to the general interest. And that's what the facade looks like now. There's a glazed pavilion, which if you're Scottish, you might call a statutory, or Italian, a veranda. But it was actually part, again, of the original design, and that was re-put onto the south facade. So you can sit there, summer, winter. Actually, you overheat in it, frankly, right now, because of the nature of it. Then there's the entry crossing space. Originally, you would have entered from the south, but as the campus sits at the minute, you enter from the north. That's what it looked like when we inherited the building, and that's what it looks like now in terms of the windows were reinstated. Bits of them remained, and the bits that weren't there in place, we put them back in. So we see this building in itself as a piece of circularity. It was an historic structure, a 200-year-old structure. It was a ruin. We reimagined it. It was a hospital. We've now reimagined it as a student centre. And this is actually only the first time it's been stabilised. The sports people want out. Their spaces aren't big enough. They're kind of bouncy as well because it's timber floors. They want to move on to somewhere else. So this is the first stage, and it might be reimagined again. The other thing that we did was, this is the kitchen and dining space. Again, large open areas, and then this is what they look like now. You can see the funny, the sort of crazy floor colours, but again, it came from the colours that existed on site. We left walls open. They would all have been lime render. Essentially, the walls still have to dry out because it was left without a roof for 60 years. So the walls are still actually drying out. We're starting to put some lime plaster onto them. Lime plaster, not plasterboard where we can. Again, because that would have been the original material. It's better for what that building is, and it's more in keeping with the nature of it. The other thing we did was reuse, actually we turned adversity into an advantage as far as we saw it. We put the tender out, the tender came back too high, surprise. So we had literally no money left for any furniture. So as I said, we are building a whole series of buildings on the city campus and selling the other buildings which used to exist around the city that were DIT. So it was my lovely job to walk around all those buildings, photograph what I thought was reusable furniture from 5 of the buildings that could be used in these spaces. So we have church pews, we have Kevin Street benches. I don't know if anyone was ever Kevin Street. We have Cahill Brew Street high chairs. We have some of the, and that's them in situ now. So there's the Kevin Street benches there. There's the Cahill Brew Street table. So this is completely reused, complete recycle. I'm sure they've got some awful materials in them to start off with, but we didn't, other than clean them down and reuse them. And we see this is actually the ultimate reuse, anything that could be. We have soft furnishings which existed. These were also on Kevin Street. These were in Mountjoy Square. We used them in the common rooms. We used them in the canteen spaces. So essentially did the inventory. We still have some which we haven't reused, and then put them in situ. That's some of the church pews, which sit really nicely in our new subsidiary and are very well occupied. That's the student union space. So again, with some of the soft furnishings, it makes it, it's very appropriate actually for a student use space because it is kind of eclectic and it is a bit, not sort of high-end design, shall I say, but it fits very well in terms of the use, in terms of the people who are using them. That's other examples that the modular furniture from Rathmine's reception space ended up all over the building. So modular's good. They like modular. And there they are again in the veranda space. We also even use some of the flip-top tables again, because the flip-top tables can be adapted and are used. So some of them are used in meeting rooms, some of them are used in office spaces, and the same with the stackable chairs. Similarly, they're used all over the building where they can be. And these are some of the images of all the finished spaces before they had any students in them. They have a series, as I say, of 18 music spaces. That's the space in the middle is the one of the studio for sports, and the one at the end there is one of the common rooms. That's, again, the lime green. Not to everybody's taste, but we, matter of fact, we got complaints about it from one of the deans. But we used the argument that was part of the original colour and part of the memories of the types of space it was. That's the south facade, entirely re-rendered, all of the brand new windows put into place. And that's one of the spaces, that's the dance studio, which was one of the requests of the students. And that's the spaces in use. That's the dining area, which is phenomenally heavily used at the minute, which is fantastic to see. And again, the corridor spaces and the common spaces. So we like to think it's been a success, and we like to think it's a very good example of circularity in design. Thanks very much.
Right, do we have any questions? Yes.
No, sorry, I didn't catch the name of the first speaker.
Honey.
Annie, sorry,
Yes.
Annie. No, my heart slightly sank when you put up that slide of all the things that you have to ask about, architects and designers should ask, and PVC was one of them, because obviously with Bolon, we have PVC in our product. But I think it could be slightly misleading to say that ask about PVC, and if it's in something, you completely disregard it. Because there are certain plastics that are construction plastics that are not throwaway kind of plastics. And, you know, a company like Bolon, for example, is very, very environmentally responsible. And, you know, everything they do is incredibly transparent. Everything in their EPDs, in their sustainability reports are there exactly what they're using, how they're using it. So I just think it's just having a sort of blanket thing to say, ask if PVC is in it and then disregard it, because for some companies, they use it extremely responsibly. So
we actually have Bolon in our showroom, London showroom,
Yeah.
so we're actually aware of it. But as you said, there's different type of PVC, and the PVC that I was referring to was mostly referring to that, like the ones that's got, oh, thank you, I think I'm loud enough, that's got less chemicals to it. But those were the ones that shouldn't, that's why I said I always ask the question. But then again, I agree with you, if it shouldn't be discarded, but there's different types of PVC. Some that's toxic, and some, I don't know that.
yeah, I just sometimes I think people get it into their heads and they automatically say, oh, that's PVC, I'll just discount it. Whereas there are good PVCs and bad PVCs.
Of course,
and
if a product's got EPD especially, or life cycle assessment,
Yeah.
that's why it's good to have it. But thanks for bringing that up.
Thanks.
Anybody else? I'll ask a question then. This reuse, recycle, being environmentally responsible, is there a cost involved? Is it financial cost involved, both from a designer and architect perspective as well as a manufacturer? Or is it financially sustainable?
I think there's some always, sorry, I'm going first. There's always some, we had this conversation earlier on, there's always some extra added cost associated to sustainability. I think with some of the products that we're working on, sometimes we just get taken off the specification because we're 10%, 20% more expensive. But then again, what's very important is to understand that if you are in a position that we want to make a change in the future, we have to make, you have to pay that 10% extra cost, because your product, it will be recyclable because there's no red list chemicals to it, because it has the EPD, it has the LCA, it has the declare label. So I think, I don't know how it works from your perspective.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it does cost. I think we have to change our mindsets about how we allocate budgets for certain projects, understanding the use of the project. Your project was a very good example of how to reuse materials, so how to reuse products, and then look at where money can be allocated for slightly more expensive products that are more sustainably or circular minded. I think everything does come at a price. Innovation does cost. Designing new materials do cost. When plastic was first invented or introduced, it was a lot more expensive than your traditional materials. But due to requirements and use, these things have inherently become cheaper because they've become, widely mass produced. So even the way that we view our material, it does cost. Innovation does cost. However, we've taken a different approach now and said, actually, instead of keeping it to ourselves, we want other people to use it so it can reduce the cost of it. And therefore, it drives our just cause to being more sustainable if other companies are able to use that same material. But I think, you know, when we talk about sustainability, we need to think about responsibility and how we design these spaces, as well as, you know, allocating the right type of budgets for it. So, yeah.
I think maybe the materials. We are actually working in the university as part of our. We have a VP for sustainability as well, and she wants to embed procurement, sustainable procurement, into what we do. For that reason, we are tied to certain criteria, again, because we're a state organisation, and a lot of times we are stuffed in terms of how we procure things because it's done somewhere out there. But if we embed the correct questions within the procurement, that gives us extra leverage. And the examples that we were given there, a lot of that, I wouldn't necessarily have chosen some of those, the look and feel, but it didn't really matter. What you actually realised was that there's a lot of adaptability, and I think the Vitra example is an excellent one in terms of reuse and reuse and reuse and reuse. If it is something which is that level of quality, whether it's the chair or can be easily adjusted to be reused as well. And I think people are very interested in that, whether it's the upholstery, whether it's the bearings, whether it's whatever aspect of it as well, so that we can reuse them for 60 years. And that's what we would see with our buildings. And I think that's the value that designers can bring to it as well, that spaces or things that can be reimagined and reused. And I think that that's the big sale point that we can provide.
Yeah, I'd agree. As from a designer's perspective, my role is not to manage the cost, it's to convince a client that going with a particular product is the right thing to do for the aesthetic reasons or for the longevity. You know, if it has a much longer life, I don't want to put something in that's going to break in 5 years. If something is sustainable and it's going to last the length of, you know, a much longer time in that building, then the client is more likely to be convinced too. So, yeah, I think from the cost isn't everything really, and most of our clients can see that too. So, yeah, that's what I would say on it.
Yeah, sometimes it's also a matter of perspective. If you look at the long-term goal, then furniture that can be reused, they've got good quality, then the actual fact is you're saving a lot of money on it.
Yeah, absolutely. It depends on the client and the project. Like with the central bank, you know, that's their building for life now. So they wanted to invest in good products and achieve the high sustainability goals with their fit out. So yeah.
Anything else? So both Colette and Eilish, you touched the element of flexibility, and we never probably needed to be as flexible as we've been in the last 2 years, where you started a project with a certain criteria in mind, and then all halfway through you had to change the layout of your rooms. And Colette, similarly, you're already saying that some of the spaces you designed now, they need to be reinvented, find a different use to it. Is that you think that's a trend, something that is going now to stay? Or are we going back at some point when we forget about the horrendous 2 years we had, then we go back to design one space that can be used in that way, and that's it?
Oh, I think people are very interested in having it here to stay for lots of reasons. We're also undertaking space use assessments on the back of the last 2 years to see which spaces are really heavily used and which spaces aren't used at all. Also for the fact that we have to, I won't tell you what our heating bill is, it's unbelievable right now. So we only want to actually have to service and utilise and maintain spaces when we have to, or else maximise the spaces that we do have. And in order to do that, the spaces have to be utilised in a number of different ways. And that doesn't necessarily mean sort of high-end folding walls, or it just means, as I say, like a rectangular room can be used in lots of different ways. If you've got flip-top tables, if you've got stackable chairs, if you've got lighting that can be adjusted blinds, etc., etc. So I have to say tech is massive in that. But I think thinking in terms of that flexibility, that adaptability, you even talked about casters, something as simple as that actually means that the space can be very simply changed from one type of use to another type of use. And that is categorically happening because people had to do it, and now they've got used to doing it, and I think they quite like doing it, actually, as you talked about in terms of how people work. People quite like being somewhere else and working somewhere else. The most heavily occupied spaces in the central quad is 36,000 square meters. The most heavily occupied spaces are the breakout spaces, where there's just a variety of different chairs and furnishes with a USB or a power socket beside them, and they're used all the time.
Yeah, and I think clients like, I mean, the minute we finish a fit out, we'll come in the next week and they've changed all the furniture around. They like to control their own environment and set it up whatever they want to, whatever way works for them. And that means that we need to provide them with the types of furniture that allows for that flexibility. It's more personal and it's more, yeah, they're creating their own comfort in, I'm just referring to office space here, but so in that regard, I think flexibility is critical going forward. Yeah.
Fantastic. Anybody else? No? Right. Okay. So thank you very much, all four of you. This has been really, really interesting. And for everybody else, thank you for coming. We've got drinks and nibbles, so please stick around. And you can have, we've got a lot of product here that you can use in flexible manner, environmentally friendly and responsible manner. So please take your time, and thank you very much for coming tonight.